All right, I'll start now then. Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount Podcast. My name is Shogun, and joining me today again for the second time on the podcast is Greydon Square, a very talented hip hop artist, rapper, and also has expanded into other interesting projects like comic books and science fiction related stuff. So we're going to get into all of that and a lot more. You can find our last podcast on YouTube and BitChute on the Roundtable podcast, and I highly recommend it. It's a very interesting discussion. That being said, welcome back, Graydon Square. Thank you for joining us. How are you, sir?
Thank you for having me. I am well. How are you guys?
Really good, thank you, and grateful to have you here. Big fan of your music. A lot of people in the server are big fans of your music. I think it was my friend Michael, who is also a friend of yours, I think, or is on one of your servers, who set up this second podcast. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. I know, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, for anyone who hasn't heard it yet, check it out. But Graydon's music is sort of, I would describe it as sort of really high IQ. Big brain, mind blowing kind of concepts expressed through rap, and that's a really cool. It's a really cool vibe.
Well, I
So,
appreciate the glowing endorsement, and that's pretty amazing intro. So I appreciate your compliments. Thank you.
well, it's just my opinion, and like I said, a lot of people here put your stuff on the Bongo Bot from time to time. Kardashev Scale, Type 4, and all that great stuff. So I think your last album seems to be The City of the Type of Tomorrow. Is that correct? City on the Type of Tomorrow?
City on the Type of Forever, actually.
Forever, sorry, my
And but
mistake.
but but you're partially correct in that. In that the inspiration for the album's title was directly related to the Star Trek episode City on the Edge of Forever, and it was that episode's title as well as a book by a science fiction author named Greg Bear, who wrote a lot of the Halo mythos, if anybody's familiar. He wrote a book called City at the End of Time. And the whole Type 4 quadrilogy is based on a play on words of the Time Lords from Doctor Who being the Rhyme Lords of Type 4. So I kind of borrowed, I melded those two titles together. And, what do you mix when you get City on the Edge of Forever with City at the End of Time? In my opinion, you get, City on the Type of Forever. And that's basically where that came from.
That's very cool, and it ties into a lot of stuff we've been talking about lately on the server. We've been talking a lot about science fiction, all the inspiration, all the information, ideas we can get from science fiction. Actually, we've been watching a lot of Star Trek on the server pretty much regularly. I'm just catching up on Star Trek, but I remember when I listened to our last podcast, you talked about what a big influence Star Trek has had on you and your thinking and stuff like that.
Well, I'd have to get in on some of those watch parties because I love me some Trek, and I love watching Trek with other people who love watching Trek. So it's like we're a minority community, even in science fiction, even despite the impact we've had on society and the world. I still believe we're like a minority fan base.
That would be awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a DM next time we're doing one. We usually watch pretty much every night lately. We watch a couple episodes, and like I said, I'm catching up on it. Missed out growing up, so it's all new to me. But obviously, just deep philosophical concepts, moral concepts, and stuff explored through the medium, and it's pretty cool. And speaking about science fiction, I was checking out some of your new stuff. It looks like you've got a comic book company now, correct?
Yeah. I actually started the comic book company about a year and a half before City on the Type of Forever was finished because I'd been working on the album for like 3 years. And so about halfway through, I kind of made the company of Majestic Comics official. And for what it's worth, it was all kind of set up in the music that I had already written because I had talked about some of these concepts that I'm using in the concept in on the album. So all the stuff that I had mentioned about the omniverse and everything about that, like that stuff is the structure. It's the backdrop for the comic book stories.
Very cool. So I was just looking, is the newest episode coming out the Entropy and Extra P episode, or is that the first one that came out?
So Entropy and Entropy is actually the title of the actual book. The the story that we're telling in Extropy and Entropy is, and for those who probably never seen the art, not well, I should probably. I'm gonna show you a little bit of my bedroom. Don't judge. Sorry, I didn't realize this blur was gonna be so crazy. Sorry, everybody. Um, So basically, we have been working on this story for about 10 years before we actually made our company official, right? And the general point was to take all of that creativity that went into um, creating music and create stories. I always wanted to write like Star Trek episodes. I tell comic book heads all the time, like I come from science fiction. I come from Star Trek. I don't really come from comics. So the way that I process stories is through the lens of, Star Trek and Stargate and stuff like that. Uh, but me and my best friend, Tombstone the Dead Man, and my other best friend, Structure, we all decided to kind of come together with our talents. Structure is our artist. Um, Tombstone is our editor, and I'm the CEO of the company. And we all have different talents and different strengths, but when we put our talents together, we become Majestic Comics. And I feel like the comic book Extropy and Entropy is the first expression of that. And the actual like concept of the story and everything, I tell people all the time, it's probably the greatest compliment you can get when someone tells you that the criticism that they have of your work is that it's too complicated. So I will preface this next statement by saying I understand that what I'm about to say sounds probably a pretty complex and probably not the greatest entry point for a first issue if you're just trying to get your kids into it. Maybe not. Maybe if they're around 12, 13 years old, they might play with these concepts in their head. But the concept of extropy and entropy revolves around these two characters in a reality in which a particular science is only allowed to be explored up to a certain point. And there are different races of beings within this kind of, this galaxy of beings. And it's one of the few places in this universe that actually has life, this particular galaxy with these races. And we make that pretty clear at the onset. But we play with this concept of this forbidden science and this idea that there's going to be people who will say that you can practice or study a particular science up to a certain point, and then it becomes dangerous to everybody, and we can't allow you to do that. So a long time ago, before the story that you kind of come into is taking place, some people in this galaxy decided that this far, no further when it comes to the study of this science. And so you fast forward about 1,000 years, give or take, and you have a scientist by the name of Eoa Gray, and he is a member of a race of beings that are very inquisitive. I'd say more inquisitive than human beings. They're very much into the sciences. They're very much into mathematics and engineering and all kind of crazy stuff, right? There are other races in this galaxy that are a part of this agreement that says this far, no further with this technology. And one of the beings of these races is, for lack of a better term, he is the ruler of this kingdom of people. And by extension, kind of the trendsetter of the culture, as to what they will kind of allow and the things that they'll decide they want to confront and whatnot. And it just so happens that these two beings are friends and they know each other quite well. They've went on adventures together even before the first book, issue 0, comes out. And you come into a conversation where they are debating the merit of this science and the merit of why certain sciences should be forbidden or why it shouldn't be. And this encounter, this relationship is the backdrop of an incident that takes place regarding this science. And it pits them at odds because they are relatively close friends. They consider each other brothers in a lot of ways, and yet they have an obligation, one from an intellectual perspective, the other from a loyalty and fealty perspective to their kingdom. And it forces a situation where it unravels this uneasy peace treaty that's been going on for about 800 to 1,000 years. And the consequences of this, let's just say, are omniversal. So I know that's probably a lot, and I'm sure it's not the greatest thing to come into on some entry level shit where people are you know trying to just get introduced on some casual stuff. It is called extropy and entropy, and that's not even a title that you probably would think is not such and such man or anything like that. So
No,
that's kind of that's the short version.
that's really interesting. And if I could just ask a few follow-up questions. So
Yeah,
there's
absolutely. Go ahead.
two or more major factions. They have a peace treaty based on restricting certain kind of sciences, and they are having a debate about multiple different sciences and which ones should be allowed and which ones should be restricted. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, they're both going to do what's in the best interest of their people. Don't know why that didn't open, but the general idea is that you have other races that are, essentially bound by this agreement as well, and they also have a vested interest in the validity of the agreement that, hey, you guys aren't going to experiment with this because it theoretically could put all of us at danger. And yet the character of Iowa Gray, I'm not he's not the lead scientist, he's simply one of the more famous scientists of his world. But there are others who are in the vein of, this is one of the most famous thinkers of this planet. He's invented several, revolutionary things. He's proved, a lot of crazy things, but he's also considered kind of a fringe kook. I combine the characters of like Doc Brown from Back to the Future, Quinn Mallory from Sliders, Donatello from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and kind of like myself. And and Samantha Carter from SG1. I'd probably say that's the fourth piece of DNA, creative DNA that's in that. But then, myself and kind of the way that I look at science and I look at, just experimentation and knowledge and all that type of stuff. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating, and I'll definitely look into it. And everybody should check it out. We'll post links to Greydon's channel. And is that the best place to find information about the comic too, or?
Yeah. Majesticcomics.com. I think the best way to support and get, behind the scenes stuff and kind of get a say in the development of it in some way is our Patreon, because through our Patreon subscriptions, like, you have direct access to the creators and submit them ideas directly. And we have, like, voting for storylines and that sort of stuff. We have character ideas that we run by the fans and, you know, that sort of stuff. So we try to make it to where, because people are on the ground floor of this, they at least have some measure of influence on how the building is built, because it's their money,
Very cool. So I put a link there to Majestic Comics in the general chat so everybody can check it out.
Yeah, majesticcomics.com or majesticcomics.shop if you want to actually like buy a physical. We have like trading cards and physical books and posters and like hoodies and stuff like that. So yeah,
Very
I feel
cool.
like this camera's more clear than the other one.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like another thing that you're into is a video game called Starfield. Is that correct? It seems like you're pretty involved in that at like a pretty high level, from what I can gather. Running a guild or something along those lines.
So I will say this to anybody who's listening to this who knows me. I'm sure they laughed when you said Starfield, because I'm actually into Star Citizen really heavy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I knew it
It's
was Star
no,
Citizen. Starfield
no.
is the newer one that came out. My
Yeah,
bad.
it's
Yeah.
totally okay. But it's funny because that game was so divisive when it first came out. And a lot of Star Citizen fans and a lot of Starfield fans were getting into it because they thought one, infringed on the, whatever. And it's just, at the end of the day, I'm all for more space games. Like I've been playing Star Citizen now for 9 years. I got in when the funding was at 18 million. They're at like 700 million right now. And I remember playing when it was just a hangar and, you couldn't even fly in space. There was no ship to get into, just the hangar bay. And so for me, like Star Citizen has been in a lot of ways the way people play D&D is the way I play Star Citizen. I don't play Star Citizen for the game itself, even though I consider it the greatest game ever conceived. And if executed, it's the greatest game of all time, and it's not even close. But I play Star Citizen from the perspective of a 12-year-old who watched Star Trek: The Next Generation and wanted to be a starship captain, and watched my TV dad, Captain Ben Sisko, command the Defiant, and I always wanted to do that. And so Star Citizen is one of the few things that gives me that particular feeling of sitting in the captain's chair. I tell people even now, like this is year 9 of me sitting in the captain's chair, and I've literally seen it all. You know what I mean? I feel like there's nothing that surprises me anymore about command and about leadership and about leading people. And I'm a combat veteran myself, so I know what this is like also downrange in theater in a combat environment. But when you do it in Star Citizen and half your org is ex-military, most of these people are either, prior service or military adjacent. They had, family members who served. They had, brothers and sisters who served and moms who served and stuff like that. So they're very familiar with the hierarchical structure that we have. And we just took what Star Trek did, and I just took what I learned in the Army, and I just combined the two, and we made an org. And it's been 9 years. In case anybody's interested, unifyfederation.com. Yeah, we are always looking for people who want to play Star Citizen with us. We play every Sunday. But it's a game that allows me to fancy myself a Starfleet captain when I know that's not really something in reality that will ever come to be. So
Yeah, sorry, I knew it was Star Citizen. I even thought in my mind, don't mix it up, and then I just crossed
nah,
it.
it's all
But
right.
that's very
Look,
cool.
Starfield is a dope game for what it is. I never played it, but I've seen people play it, and it looks cool. But I like the high consequence of commanding people. It's call it ego, call it arrogance, but there's something about leading your people into combat and coming out with no casualties and absolutely obliterating the other side. And
Absolutely.
there's no feeling like that. They're like the way you celebrate with those people and nothing rehearsed. You didn't know it was coming. Like y'all was just chilling, coming from Lyria with some had night, and you didn't know you were going to get attacked by trolls. And next thing you know, there's like 6 of them, but you got like 25 people in the verse at different parts of the verse. You get on comms, they're there within 3 minutes. And yeah, it's lights out for anybody who ever attacked you. Then they go on our KOSL, and then it's another story, our kill on sight list. But yeah, so I take Star Citizen very seriously. I take Star Citizen as seriously as people who've been playing D&D for 35, 40 years.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, and I'm just curious to get a feel for it. Like, so obviously, there's combat. Is that most of what it is? Like, if someone's part of your
No.
crew, if somebody's part of your crew, what kind of things do you have them doing? Like,
So it's wow, I did not know I was going to be talking about Star Citizen tonight. This is awesome. So it's like one of my favorite things to do in life. Let's talk about Star Citizen. So okay, a couple of things. Star Citizen is intended to be an open world persistent sandbox that just happens to take place in a star system or multiple star systems, if you will. There is a single player version of Star Citizen called Squadron 42 that is more Starfield than Star Citizen is. It is the single player campaign, tells you a story. It's got all these famous actors in it, like Mark Hamill's involved, Gillian Anderson, like Gary Oldman. I mean, they're slapping people. It's dope, right? But it's single player. And look, sidebar, I don't like playing single player games. Like I'm very much I want to play against people. When I play NBA 2K or MLB The Show or NHL, Hockey, I know I'm beating another human on the other end of that controller, and if I win, I know he's feeling it, or her, because I've run into some dope ass female NBA 2K players. But like, I know they're feeling it if I win or we win, and I know they're feeling it if I beat them, right, or they lose. So for me, with the whole multiplayer aspect of it, I'm not so much interested in Squadron 42. It looks great. I'm sure I'll play it at some point because it's a part of Star Citizen, and apparently you can discover things about the game that will help you in the persistent universe. But the part of Star Citizen I'm interested in is the MMO RPG, persistent, open galaxy where you can literally go from a planet into space to a space station, dock with the space station, call another ship that's way bigger that 100 people could fit in. You and all your people get on the ship. Then you get all your people who want other ships that want to dock with that ship. You then egress from that point. You then set a course for a moon. The moon is uninhabited, so you go there, you find some rare minerals, and you go down there and you engineer some rare minerals. While you're engineering, pirates come through. Your air tac engages them way out there because you got a good air tactical. They're running a good air cap, so they intercept way before they even get to your work site. You're able to reconfigure your elements and redeploy and support. Now you've heard 6, 7 splashes. Those guys are wiped off the map. You recall your guys. Oh, it's been 2.5 hours. Let's call index. End exercise is called. Comms over the radio. Manifest calls it. Everybody heads back to home base, and you've had a fucking incredible adventure, and you could have never recreated those circumstances. So Star Citizen, like I said, is like a D&D aspect. But to answer your question more directly, what do I have my people do? So because you can do, I mean, I could talk for hours about how many different ways you can play the game, but let's just narrow it down to the elements that I have people perform in the fleet, right? So the first thing you have is operations. Our flagship, the Nichelle Nichols, it requires operators. That means a helmsman, a pilot, somebody to basically be a navigator and know which points, which jump points we're actually going to call, and which warp points we're going to go to, and how we're actually going to get to places. Then you need your turret gunners. You usually need 3 to 6 of those. Then you need your engineers that essentially will help you if something breaks, if there's a fire on board, if you guys actually need to go mine something, salvage something or whatever. You have your engineers and your operators that act in unison in operations, right? Then you have security. These are your space marines. These are people who are excel at FPS, and they are the ones who will usually engage boarding parties. They're usually the landing party. They secure landing locations. They're usually a part of scout missions, extra security details that involve hunting KOSL targets that we talked about earlier. They will search the server for you if you're on our KOSL, and if you pop, we will drop everything and come hunt your ass down. We don't give a fuck. If you're on that KOSL, you deserve to be there, and we're coming to get you. We will literally stop a mission midpoint if there's a KOSL pop in the chat. It's like, oh, wait a minute, such and such is in the server? Oh, hell yeah. Let's get our people. We running up on them. So those are the guys who usually bear the brunt of that hand-to-hand, small arms fire, close quarter combat, right? Then you have air tactical, which I talked about earlier. This is your Air Force, right? These are the people who are making sure that nobody gets too close to not only capital ship, but your engineering vessels, your medical vessels, which we'll talk about in a second. Any other ships that you have in the area, transport ships, runabouts, whatever you got, right? Air tac is going to make sure that any vessels that reach within a certain point, they get one warning. Hey, we are operating in active UF airspace. Please don't cross this boundary or you'll be fired upon, right? That's the standard, what we tell people. If they cross that boundary, hey, it's on you. Don't get in the chat and trip. We have a record of the fact that we gave you a warning that we were operating in that area and we secured that area for our fleet operations. But some people want to test you. They want to see if you're a real fleet. And then when that message comes up the chain, hey, Scalpel, this logo, this Scalpel come back, and I'm like, in operations, and that actually comes through. Yeah, that person violated that one warning. You're free to engage. And chances are, if they get too close, they're going to get engaged anyway because they're not going to let them get close to the flagship. So our air attack is our Air Force. Then you have medical. There's always going to be people who are going to get hurt. There's always going to be casualties. You need people who not only care about the digital, physical health of your characters, but also the real mental health of the players. So our medical is kind of also conditioned to not only look at, oh, your guy is sick in the game, I need to send a support and resurrect this guy, he's dead in the cave or something like that, he's down in the cave, but also, hey man, you sound a little agitated today, are you all right, you want to talk, like let's chop it up, let's smoke a bowl, let's if you want to just chop it up outside of the game, like medical, the chief medical officer and those who watch Star Trek knows this, and we lifted it directly from there. I don't know if there's any truth to this in the actual Navy, but the chief medical officer of my fleet has the ability to relieve me of command, and not permanently, but in the sense that I am not fit for duty at that particular time because my health or my mental health is compromised. And he's had to do it one time when I had COVID and I came to formation, and I was, because I'm usually on camera, and I was sweaty. I was in my robe. I actually had my hockey jersey on, my hockey hoodie on over that, and I had my robe on over that, and I was sweating. I was like shivering and shit. And I was literally trying to command the fleet, and he pulled me aside. He was like, Cap, I can't let you do it. I'm like, what? He was like, I've never done this before, but you gave me this, and I have to pull this card, bro. Go to bed. And I'm just like, all right. And I literally crawled out of my chair and into my bed and passed out. And he took over. He took command. And he's now the XO of the fleet. But it's like the medical officers will do shit like that in our fleet because it's not important for you just to show up and be a gamer amongst our crew. We're not playing this for the game. We're an extension of Grand Unified. That's why we play the game, to represent GU in that space. But we care more about you as a person, so that person's healthy, as opposed to you as a gamer, or why didn't such and such do his job in the game. We don't really care about that. We have a rule, like we don't recruit for skill. I don't give a damn how good you are at whatever it is you do. If you're an asshole and you're not fun to play with, I don't want you around my people, because we have a great chemistry. We got like 40 people and they all get along. I mean, how often do you see that? So to me, and that's not even talking about our allies. We have whole alliances and shit with people that is like, hey, if it gets too much for us, we got people we can call. They got people they can call. There's a loose alliance of like small orgs that these big orgs can't bully, because they know we'll all come together on that ass. So, and then to tie that all together, you have command, right? You have your officers corps, you have your flag officer corps, and then you have, myself. And that's kind of how we run the fleet. I take a lot of experience from my own military experience and being in Iraq, but a lot of it comes from like Star Trek and, reading up on, military field manuals about strategy and, the fundamentals of naval combat I've been reading recently. It's been an awesome experience because I'm an Army guy. So I have to translate everything from Navy to Army and then back to Space Navy, which is kind of weird. So hopefully I wasn't.
That sounds extremely cool. I'm sold. I'll definitely check the game out. So you guys run it very seriously, like a military organization. And I understand all the ways that's super rewarding. But so I can try and understand, like, say someone like me who's never played not only that game but really any game in that genre. Like, let's say I applied to join your crew or your team or whatever. How would you take someone like me who knows absolutely nothing about this and put you to use? Like, what would be your first job? Like,
so. Personally, first of all, that's a great question. I love it when we get new players who have. I mean, you're familiar with PC gaming, right?
Yeah, a PC game, but okay. I've never played, EVE Online, Star Citizen, or anything really, as far as I understand, like what you're describing. So Absolutely. It sounds very complicated, right? So you take someone like me who knows nothing about Star Citizen. How would I get in on what would be my first role? Do you think?
Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would interview you and I would try to talk you out of joining the fleet. That would be the first thing I would try to do, and ask everybody. I do it to everybody. Here's the thing. This is hilarious, but it's true. A lot of people want to peek behind the curtain and see like what it's like to actually be inside of an organization like this, where we take it very seriously. The whole idea of hierarchical command and rank is something that is nearly absolute in the Unified Federation, right? In a way that it's not in GU. Grand Unified as a community is much, 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 much more casual, right? We don't, there's no, I mean, the different houses have different rules in politics. We could get into GU and the structure of that and all that. But when it comes to the UF, it's very much like being quote unquote in the military, simply because half of us were in the military and we're all familiar with military decorum. So, like little things that maybe civilian, are you prior service, military service at all?
No, sir. But
Okay,
thank you for your
so
service.
well, thank you for thanking me. And I'm not trying to flex. I'm not trying to pull a flex card. I'm only using this as an example of what I'm going to bring up. But like in a situation where me and the XO, the first officer, is talking, right, and you're in the room and you're a private, you don't just interrupt us talking and start talking. That's not a thing in the military. I notice people online when they talk to each other, they just talk over each other all the time. That's fine if you're kind of the same rank and you're the same kind of your peers, right? But what if this is an elder or someone who has higher rank than you? Well, then you wait for them to finish speaking and you say, hey, Cap, hey, XO, can I interrupt real quick? Are you busy? Oh, okay, no problem. Hey, I just want to let you know X, Y, and Z. Boom, no problem. People in our org, they understand that when you walk into a room, you're not just popping in and just saying stuff over what everybody else has got going on. You're reading the room, right? There's a lot more social dynamics that I need to let you know of before you even join the fleet. So I'm going to try to, in the interview, I'm going to try to talk you out of it. I'm going to be like, listen, we meet 3 times a month at least, right? Like sometimes it's 4 times a month, but it's every Sunday and it's basically around the same time. And we have a system where you RSVP. So you let us know by Thursday or Friday if you're going to be there on Sunday. Usually people, we have people turning in RSVPs on Saturday night, right? Like it's okay. But it at least lets us know you're engaged. But it lets us also know, whoever's planning the mission, hey, you got eight air attack coming tonight. You got 4 Marines coming tonight. You got 8 operators coming tonight, 2 engineers. You got, 5 corpsmen, medics, right? We looked at the RSVP and we see who RSVP'd yes, no, or maybe. So we can tell, like, okay, such and such maybe got a 50% chance of showing up late in the formation. That's good. In case we run into some issues, we can call them in as they're coming in, reinforcements, whatnot. So I'm telling you all this stuff in the interview to try to provoke your lizard brain, fight or flight. And I'm trying to see if you're like, hey, you know what? I'll just check it out casually on my own time and then I'll get back to you. That's usually a sign that people are, they're like, oh, okay, this is way too complicated. I'm not trying to do all that. I just want to play Star Citizen. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We've had people who were in our fleet leave our fleet just because they wanted to go play more casually. Totally understandable. But some of us, we play Star Citizen for this level of decorum. Some of us kind of miss the element of being in the military, at least some of the elements. Some of that shit, you can keep it. But the elements of cooperating with other people and doing that from a hierarchical command structure perspective, like, yeah, personally, I'm okay with that. So that'd be the first thing I would tell you, is you probably want to rethink, because we're super complicated in the context of how much commitment we've given to this. And also it may be a little too professional, quote unquote, that you might be comfortable for. But if you make it past that stage and you're like, you know what, Cap, I'm totally cool. Like, let's do it. I'm still here. I'll see you on Sunday. Okay, not a problem. My next question, what department do you want to be in? What do you like to do? Maybe you like to pew pew from a ship. Okay, do you want to do it from a turret gunner on a big capital ship, or do you want to do it in a pilot seat of a smaller fighter ship? And then you're like, well, shit, I kind of want to pew pew shoot people in the face close quarters. Cool, you're joining security. Let me introduce you to my chief of security, Commander such and such. He'll come in there, he'll be like, yo, we're lucky to have you. We like going pew pew right to people's faces. Let's do some training. And now you'll start working with these people regularly. You'll be in gaming proximity with them, so you understand their mannerisms. Some of them have accents you may not be familiar with right off the bat or something like that. Now you're playing with these guys. Let's say it's been 2 operations or 2 formations and you haven't seen any quote unquote action. Formation 3, we're down on the planet We're salvaging a downed ship that, we came across on our sensors and stuff. And you're on board. All of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. Oh shit, what's going on? We're getting attacked. Red alert comes over Manifest. Manifest is our communication tool that sends out alerts throughout the fleet. Now everybody's getting alerted. People are running to battle station with fire clearances, right? If you see something that's not ours, you're clear to shoot it, right? Next thing you know, there are ground troops deploying. People are deploying ground troops. They're trying to board the ship. Guess who's on the front line of that engagement? You are. And now that all that training that you did, hopefully for the last two formations, you learned how to coordinate with your team to be able to magnify the things that are going to be necessary to win that engagement, right? We like to concentrate fire, shoot, move, communicate, call in air support, like all these different things that make it to where we always fight the battle on our own terms. We're never going to fight the battle on your terms. If we're going to lose, we're going to lose on our own terms. And so you'll have to tell me if that's what you want to do, or maybe you want to be a medic. Maybe you want to help people. Once you tell me what you want to do, I get you introduced to the people in your department, and then they are doing things already that are training, and they will bring you up to speed. You don't have to know anything. In fact, I don't want you to know anything. I would rather you not have bad habits that we have to unteach you.
That's really cool. And just I posted a link for anyone who's interested to the game. And also, just out of curiosity, you mentioned the name of your would it be called the guild? Is it called a fleet? What is Unified Federation, right?
Yeah, the Unified Federation. It's a fleet. I personally just call it the Federation. We call it the UF or the fleet. We've had it for so long. It is simply an extension of Grand Unified, the organization. I would say that it's been 9 years it's been in existence, and Grand Unified's been around, I'd say, for what, 12, 13. So it's GU's little brother for sure.
That sounds really cool. And as you're describing it, I mean, it sounds like you have similar philosophy in some regards to kind of how we try to conduct ourselves and our philosophy towards the server. So that aspect of it appeals to me as well. The decorum, the etiquette, the hierarchy, and so forth. And probably if I did get into the game, I would probably want to start with the security. It seems like the simplest, kind of build your way up from the ground up to get a mental concept of the game. Would probably be the easiest for me.
Don't get me excited. I always tell people, if you don't have a problem with calling people by rank and or being in somewhat of a paramilitaristic, organization in the terms of like how we organize ourselves and how we take our training and how we take our discipline to our task, if that's something you're into, yeah, we would be great for anybody, because most people, when they play this, they have a hard time organizing the people they're playing with and thus being effective at whatever it is they're trying to do. I see a lot of large orgs out there who have thousands of members. Guess what? We don't really care. Why? Because it's extremely hard to coordinate thousands of people in the field. I know, I've been there. When shit starts going down, you don't know what's going on. And they're a company next to you, like three streets over. There's a whole company, don't know what's going on the street that you're on the highway that you're on. And so trying to coordinate that stuff in something like Star Citizen, where you lose kind of a dimension of communication, it's the physical dimension. It's like you have to train, and you have to almost be able to know what your guy is going to do, your battle buddy is going to do before you do it. Here's another thing we do too as well. Let's say you came into security because you would want to work your way up. You know what the next thing you're getting on day one is?
What?
A battle buddy. Everybody in here know what a battle buddy is? Don't answer. I'll tell you. A battle buddy is a person you're assigned to when you first get to basic training or when you first get to your duty assignment. A battle buddy is a person that is probably not from a city you're familiar with, not from a culture you're familiar with, probably not the same skin color as you, probably not the same religion as you. And guess what? You now trust this person with your life, and they trust you with theirs, or them, whatever, however you invert that. And your battle buddy is somebody who If I need to have you do something, I'm not just going to send you. I'm sending you and your battle buddy. If you're in trouble and you need to come to my office, guess who's coming with you? Your battle buddy. And so it has people accountable to each other to make sure, like, and I tell people this at the end of formations, make sure you check on your battle buddies sometime this week. Yo, man, how you doing? You all right? Everything good? Sometimes they'll lie to you. But if you get close enough with people and that's the person you're familiar with, one of these days you're going to let your guard down. Man, I'm having problems at home. What's going on? It's just, shit with the wife. Oh, man, you want to talk about it? I'm having shit with my. So then you start, it no longer becomes just a digital facsimile of a relationship. It actually becomes like, this is my battle buddy. I need to make sure he's all right. So when we play Star Citizen, he's not distracted. Because there are real pirate orgs out there, real troll orgs out there that will just, screw up your play session just for the sake of they know where you are and you can't stop it. So, yeah, you'll have a battle buddy because, in my opinion, I'm setting you up to fail if you don't have one. I have a battle buddy, right? Like the first officer is my battle buddy. There's another captain in the fleet that's my battle buddy. Everybody gets a battle buddy. No one's above or beyond a battle buddy. Everyone needs one. I saw, not to get too personal, but I saw a comment today on Facebook from somebody who I was cool with a long time ago. Apparently something happened and we stopped being cool. But it looked like they were going through some shit today. And a battle buddy could have really been useful.
Right. Well, that sounds really cool, and I'll definitely follow up with you after the podcast or at another time about actually getting involved with that because
Bro, that'd be so
sounds really
awesome.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the invitation, and I put the link there. Anyone else who wants to check it out? I want to give other people in the audience the chance to ask questions and comment soon too, but there's probably at least 2 more questions I should ask you before that.
AMA, go ahead, brother.
Yeah.
Well, I was young. I needed the money. No, I'm just kidding.
just to touch back to music. What are you working on now, or is there an album that's under production, or anything that people can expect to come out in the next little while? Any tour shows, anything like that you want to shout out now?
Absolutely. So, I'm gonna frame this answer by calling to an interview that took place about 2 months ago with a rapper that some people might be familiar with, some people might not be. But Andre 3000, who released a flute album recently that had nothing to do with hip hop. Not that I'm hating, but he recently had an interview with I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody in the mainstream media. And they had asked him, like, how come you're not really rapping these days? And he had made a statement about he felt like he was too old to rap, or he felt like, well, what am I going to talk about? These things that maybe older people would talk about. He gave some examples about, like, having a colonoscopy or whatever. And he kind of brushed off the idea of being an older MC, right? Being an older rapper. And here's my thing about hip hop. Hip hop's been paying my bills since I was 26 years old. I will die getting hip hop royalty checks. You cannot tell the story of hip hop without mentioning Greydon Square. My legacy, for the most part, is set in stone. However, the idea that I could get too old to spit dope bars is almost like offensive to me. Not that he's a bad dude or nothing, but I just felt like it was something I could not disagree with more. Because to me, there's no age limit on being dope. Being ill with wordplay is like being ill with jujitsu. It doesn't matter how old you are. There are 60, 70-year-olds who still rolling in the gym right now. Why can't I be a 60 or 70-year-old spitting dope bars? Dope rhymes, fundamentally sound, ill wordplay, sick schemes, double, triple entendres. You mean there's an age limit on that? Nah, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I won't accept that. Otherwise, undo this whole thing called hip hop, because you should have told everybody from the beginning that there was an age limit. Oh yeah, you can't do this after 30. You can't do this after 40. Bullshit. If you're a dope painter, you're a dope painter. Hip hop just happens to be you're painting with words and color. So I framed that by saying I'm working on the second part of a 4-part project. City on the Type of Forever was one in 4 albums for Type 4, the actual quadrilogy. And the next one in that list is called Last of the Rhyme Lords, which is a play on of Last of the Time Lords from Doctor Who. And in the same way that City on the Type of Forever had a lot of Star Trek references because I was playing off that, Last of the Rhyme Lords has a bunch of Doctor Who references. I recently wrote a song, actually wrote this song at City on Type of Forever, but I knew I would use it for Last of the Rhyme Lords, so I didn't put it out or anything. But this song could have been on that album. But I wrote a song called "Demat Gun Drive By," where if you're familiar with the dematerialization gun from Doctor Who, it basically erases you from the timeline by deconstructing reality and building up a reality around you that where you don't exist. But essentially it wipes you from the timeline to where you're not even sure what you shot because there's nothing for you to remember because it never existed. The only thing that happened is that you did shoot something and wipe it from existence. So I wrote a song about this, and it's kind of an example of the type of concepts that I'm trying to do for Last of the Rhyme Lords, because I feel like people aren't taking lyricism as seriously maybe as we once did, because maybe people feel like certain MCs broke the game. Like, you know, MF Doom and Eminem and Killer Priest, and like there's some people who just broke hip hop. Like, and I don't mean in a bad way. They just did it so well. Like Eminem is so technically sound that the game freezes. That's how good he is. And so some people just feel like I'm not even gonna try this. I'm just gonna do the hippity hop, the dance. Let's do a dance move. Let's get this paper. There's a lot of money in music. Okay, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'm always going to make money from hip hop. I don't know if I'll ever not receive a royalty check based on the amount of music that I've done, plus the demographic that I've marketed to, and the fact that that would never go out of style. I mean, secular skepticism will never go out of style as long as there's humans. So there's always a market for Greydon Square. So I'm always going to be rhyming. Will I always be putting out albums? Probably not. These are probably like my last 4 albums. So Last of the Rhyme Lords, which I'm doing right now, should be finished by the end of this year. Uh, Tour of the Orphan Night, which is the one that comes after that. And then Iron Star Era, which is the one that comes after that. And then my final album is called Deathbed Playlist. And I knew I was doing all these albums back when I was doing Mando Brasset and Omniverse. I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to do these albums, these named, and they're going to be this structure. And so I'm just at this point in this journey, Last of the Rhyme Lords.
Awesome. Well, couldn't agree with you more on all that, and we'll look forward to hearing the next album when it drops. And so I promise I'll open it up to the audience after this last question. But you've talked about the Grand Unified Collective, how the Unified Federation is connected to it. So for anybody who's listening who's not familiar at all with Grand Unified, can you just talk a little bit about the idea and the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is probably the thing that I am the most passionate about in my entire life. Um, Grand Unified. Grand Unified Theory is a organization that I started. Um, the initial concepts from it go all the way back to like 2005, 2006. But I would tell people there were people in Grand Unified, and it was just me. I would tell people like, there's thousands of people in this organization called Grand Unified Theory. They're like, for real? I'm like, yeah, man, I've been a member forever. And there was nobody, right? And you fast forward a couple of years, I was going to college and I met this kid named Blue Picasso. And he's a kid from Wisconsin, and he's really big into hip hop, right? And so he's going to college, I'm going to college, and we start basically I start teaching them hip hop. And in this, the kind of organizational structures of Grand Unified were born, but it hadn't become what GU is today. Like this iteration of GU is not the way it started. But it was just me and him, and he had wrote up the first manifesto, if you will, for Grand Unified. And about maybe 2 years after that, in like 2009, maybe 2010. So it might have been 3 years after that. There was another artist who was making music that was like very similar in the context of it was deconstructing religion. It was deconstructing religion in the black community. It was talking about a lot of other political topics and skeptical topics that I was talking about. And there was a Reddit post where somebody had posted me on Reddit, and it blew up, and thousands of upvotes or whatnot. And there's whole conversations, because when you talk about my music, you tend to talk about the subjects in my music, and then people will argue with people about that. So they'll be like, well, he's just talking about religion, and that's corny. And then the person will be like, well, religion is corny. And they'll be like, well, you're corny. And then they'll start arguing about why religion, you know what I mean? So my music has always been a catalyst for people to kind of engage in debate or discussion about things, just from the nature of what I talk about. um GU People from GU have gravitated towards that because the music has created this gravity. I like to call it beacon music, right? So when this post got made, there was gravity about the artists that were being talked about. There was somebody who would say, well, this guy, they said that I'm terrible and that the person that they're talking about was dope. And he was another rapper. Like I said, he was saying all the stuff that I was saying. So I reached out to him and I was like, yo, hey, they're talking about us, me and you, in this Reddit post. And he checks it out. He's like, yo, that's crazy. I've heard of you. And I was like, yo, I've heard of you too. And we started talking, and I was like, yo, man, we should do some music together. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we recorded a song or two, and I kind of started talking to him about this concept of like Grand Unified. And he was like, I'm down. He was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together. So it was me, him, and Blue that started, me, Tombstone, the Dead Man, and Blue Picasso started Grand Unified. It took about 4 years to incubate, but from that incubation period came the first iterations of Grand Unified as we know them today. So then GU became a community of communities later on. There was a big schism. A lot of people left because they didn't agree ideologically with where we were going or where we were not going, because we're not a political organization, and we can get into that as to why that is. But we were not going to align ourselves as, look, this is a community of people who can volunteer to come and go as they please. But most people recognize that within this community of Grand Unified, I am sitting in the captain's chair. I have the ultimate decision about the direction of where this ship goes. So there were some people who disagreed with that approach, or disagreed with the approach of, hey, we're not going to be more liberal. We're not going to be more conservative. We're not going to say, we stand against this or stand for this, right? Those aren't things that we're going to be associated with Grand Unified as a creative collective. And so people left, and the people who stayed had an idea, which was, why don't the people who stayed form smaller communities underneath the banner of Grand Unified? So then you start seeing the, Reaper Legion that had predated Grand Unified, which is who Tombstone, the Dead Man's fan base, he brought them in. I had set up, me and Blue had basically set up some of the early iterations of the TXI community, the trans intellectual community. I would go on later to create the Giannis Leth House. The Valkyrie would be formed after that. Low Technology, actually no, Progeny of Ancients, which came before Low Technology, would come after that. Low Technology, LTGU, would come after that. And there were different flavors of GU that were born out of this sort of people creating smaller communities under the banner of GU. Low Technology is not like the Progeny of Ancients, but you can tell they're both Grand Unified. If I say, tell me you're in Grand Unified without telling me you're in Grand Unified, they would do something. I'd be like, oh yeah, you're in GU. Like, yeah, you spend time around us, because there's certain things that we say, certain things that we do, certain things that you would only know if you really were in Grand Unified. In the same way where it's like, if you were in the Temple Mount and you were here long enough, there's certain cultural things that this place has to offer that you're going to pick up on. So GU is no different. Each house has its own culture. The Giannis Leth, has a different culture than, you know, TXI or Progeny of Ancients or whatever, right? But there are different flavors of Grand Unified and they have different, you know, perspectives. You know, the Gaia Union, which is our youngest house, has a different perspective. Not that they're in conflict, but they have a different culture, and what they do is specific to their house. Each house has its own politics, its own structure. Some houses have a house chancellor. Some houses don't have a house chancellor. Some houses are much more democratic in nature. So GU is this community of communities that align under this single banner with the idea to educate and inform with their creativity and to help propel humanity forward up the Kardashev scale. So
Very, very cool. So thank you for walking us through all that. I think this would be a good time to ask if anyone in the audience has any questions or comments for Greydon
Hello.
Square.
Hello. I just wanted to say, when you were talking about the comic, you had made, uh,
Mhm.
I got really excited when you said that the story would have omniversal consequences, because I think, and you also mentioned the word omniverse when talking about some song you made or part of your album. And what I find interesting about that is it's sort of like an untapped uh idea that, like, you haven't really seen in a lot of mainstream art yet. Like, we see all these movies about, like, the multiverse, but, like, the omniverse is like the thing beyond that. And it's like, I just find it interesting that you've sort of tapped into that rich vein there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. If you want me to boggle your mind a little bit more, um, the comic book operates from the perspective that all realities are both equally true and false.
that's that's a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, and so I followed that down the rabbit hole, and for the comic, I actually developed a set of physics, a unification model that the science that the character that was studying that was forbidden, it fits the unification model um, of that particular science, which is supposed to be a unification model for the omniverse. And I
One
called it
more.
omniversal block cosmology. And it's basically the physics of the omniverse.
What?
And within that, there's something called the omniversal truth paradox, which basically says that um, data from one block in the omniverse can't be equivalent to data in another part of the omniverse if you use the same values. So 1 plus 1 in our reality can't equal 2 in another. It
I
would be
see.
2.1, 1.8, some variation, some offset of that. But you would never be able to come up with the same calculation in one reality in another. Just one of the things that we developed um, for this particular comic book. But that's why I tell people it may sound complicated because I'm explaining it, but it's designed for an intellectual mind to explore that sort of scale. And I'm glad that you're interested in an omniversal scale because I've always been interested in omniversal scale. And I feel like multiverses are small, universes are tiny,
Yeah.
planets
I,
are minuscule. And it's just the omni is the only thing that makes sense to me.
you want to see the big picture. And if
Yeah.
I could just one last thing. Favorite doctor? Do you have a favorite doctor?
I don't. I do have a confession about Doctor Who.
Not a
Is
big fan?
I've never actually watched Doctor Who.
Oh.
No, no. So I read a lot about Doctor Who from a place called TV Tropes,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah. I've
it's
been there.
literally heroin for creatives. Like, don't go to that place. You'll look up and 8 hours have passed you by.
You'll click
Um,
every link you see. Yeah, and you're
yeah, you'll
down
click
this
on
rabbit hole.
yes, every link is a rabbit hole. And I this is a lot of times I will find new concepts to write about through TV tropes. Like I've been doing that probably since fucking type 3. And to me, I learned a lot about why people become Whovians from that site. So never actually watched, so I can't say I have a favorite doctor myself, but I definitely am going to start watching because I need context for this album. So I'm probably going to actually go through and watch a couple of these series.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What's your name?
I go by Beautiful Dude Missile.
Beautiful Dude Missile. What a great name. Well, I appreciate it. Thank
That's
you.
what everyone says. Have a good
It's a
one.
great name.
Yeah, I have a question, actually, too.
Yeah, what do you got?
Okay, so Graydon, if it's not too forward of me, are you spiritual, and what do you think about real magic?
Um, that's a good question, and nothing is ever too forward. I mean, we only got so much time on this planet. Very few things I won't answer. But having said that, am I spiritual? I guess it depends on how you would define spiritual or spirituality. There's an interesting thing that's going on as we were talking about the omniverse a little bit earlier. There's a few people who have actually kind of explored this topic, and they've actually defined it as the omniverse as well. But they define it by introducing realms that I would say, while it's possible that they exist in blocks of the omniverse, I don't think it's at an omni scale that this may be true. Um, which is the concept of like the spiritual realm and the realm of souls and the realm of the divine realm and the realm of source and stuff like that. Okay, if we're talking about, do you think that the realm of source exists, or that there's some sort of original realm from which all other realms are produced, and that is a place that is traversable? I mean, it's possible, but I always tend to look at it as, if it is possible, then it's not supernatural. And if it's not supernatural, then I don't have to have the same standard of belief in it that I would if I was talking about something that I would consider supernatural. Um, do I believe in souls and ghosts and that sort of stuff? I don't believe that those things exist. I could be wrong. In fact, I'm willing to entertain that I am wrong about those things. But I can't force myself to believe something that doesn't make logical sense through the framework, even of something as vast as the Omni. There might be a realm of souls out there, or a realm of source out there, or some afterlife realm in which you could argue, A, that's a spiritual realm, and B, it makes up a constituency of the omniverse. But I have no real evidence to support that belief other than just saying, I think it might be true or I think it might not be true. So, am I spiritual? Depends on how you would define spiritual. And what was your second question? I'm sorry.
What do you think about real magic?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there was a time where I knew people who was interested in it. I don't think that I ever got seriously interested in it in any kind of way. Maybe because of my kind of, modern skeptical senses. Maybe I felt like it conflicted with that. Um, I don't know. Listen, the older I get, the less I know. And do I believe certain things? No. Do I believe in magic? No. Let me define magic for a second here, because from an omniversal perspective, I can make a strong case for magic, right? But I would say magic as something that would defy the laws of physics and still be possible on command of an intellectual entity. So you could
I,
basically call up something or say an incantation or do something that would basically not be possible, but instead you're making it possible. So that, I guess that's how I would define it, but maybe that's not how you would define it. So I don't know. Maybe you'd have to define it for me.
I have a new definition of magic that kind of goes along with Aleister Crowley's definition.
I'm open
It's
to hear it.
it's intentional will beyond placebo.
Interesting.
Yeah, I love your song Omniverse. It really speaks to me. I can't follow every single word because it's so fast, but at the same time, like every time I listen to it, I hear something different, and I feel like it raises my IQ ever so slightly every time I listen. But I created something called Omni Magic. If you'd be interested in that, it's a culmination of all magics, all healing modalities, and all versions of Reiki. And I used master level Reiki to magnetize all of this together into a conglomerate omnispheroidal package. and it's actually stems from the omniverse. Like all these magics reside in the different verses. I call them verses instead of universes, but
Mm.
as a magician, like I use the word omniverse quite often, and I just find it interesting that you're probably like the only person on the internet I know of that has created something based off of that word.
Wow. Well, I definitely appreciate the kind words on that song making you feel that way, and also feeling like it would raise your IQ. I think that magic as a concept should always be explored, because I would love to be wrong about reality. I'll be totally honest with you. Sometimes things happen and I'm like, I don't want this to be the it that is. And we can get into a very deep philosophical conversation about what the nature of reality actually is. I can make a case for reality that has an alpha, prime mover, the primordial consciousness argument for reality, and I can make an argument for reality that doesn't have any consciousness, because there doesn't need to be a beginning. But I know that there are going to be different people who are going to look at reality in different ways. Um, and I just think that something like magic, if it was proven to be true and recreatable in a sterile environment, and we could just do certain things with this kind of will that you're talking about, I would be very fascinated to learn that, and to know that, hey, I was completely wrong about that. Now I want to explore it. I mean, imagine if magic was a different type of technology. Like there's technology, and that's awesome. It's allowed us to do a lot of different things. But imagine if there was the magic of that, and you could do things with magic. Like, we have electricity through technology. What things could we have through magic?
Totally. And thank you for your question, Hugh and Dude Missile. Does anyone else have a question or a comment for Greydon?
Yeah, man. So you said you were into Ben Sisko. So what's your favorite Deep Space Nine episode, and what do you think about Babylon 5?
Okay, so number one, this is already the best interview I've ever had. Number two, I know Babylon 5 and DS9, the fan bases right now, or actually for the last couple of years, have been at odds, because the creator of
Yes.
Babylon 5 has kind of come out and just straight up flamed Paramount for maybe stealing his idea, maybe not. I don't know. I'm a Trekkie. I got to side with the Trek homies on this one. But
Right.
favorite Deep Space Nine episode? Fuck, man. I wish I could get this question 10 times out of 10 in an interview.
Or top 5. You can't do
Okay.
one.
Oh, that's so much easier.
Okay.
In the Pale Moonlight, Far Beyond the Stars, The Visitor, down to 2.
That's okay. Top 3 is good. I just wanted to get like a sense
Okay.
of it. I like the one where they got to kill that Romulan guy, and he does this whole log, and he deletes the whole thing at the end.
Yeah,
I
in the Pale
always,
Moonlight. Yeah.
Is that the name of the episode? I'll
Yep.
rewatch that one a lot.
Yeah. I liken myself a person who could probably do some Star Trek trivia. So if you throw an episode out there, I've probably seen it and could probably name it.
We've
I
been
think Star
watching
Trek.
footage lately. But yeah, you need to come to one of these watch parties, man. We just talk about Star Trek and watch it.
Bro, I'm in. You ain't got to tell me. That's not something you got to twist my arm for. I mean, Trek
It's
discussions.
usually Hermes that gets it going. To do the robot face.
Okay. Yeah. I usually go to conventions. I will go to I went to Vegas Con, and I will dress up in my full Starfleet uniform.
Right on.
Yeah, dog. I usually people will stop, especially if they're Trekkies, and we'll take pictures as Trekkies. That's just a thing. One thing
Yeah.
I will notice too is that a lot of these conventions, Comic Cons and fan fairs and fan fusions and stuff like that, they have all of this cosplay. And not a lot of people give Star Trek the due credit it's deserved, not only for cosplay, but for convention culture itself. We started
yeah.
that shit.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers try to talk down on us because you a Lord of the Rings fan or a Harry Potter fan. Bro, I'm big Trek over here. Like, we started this shit. Like,
Yeah,
nah.
it got canceled, and everybody banded together and
Yeah.
flooded Paramount with this, or was it Desilu Studios at the time? Flooded them with all this mail, being like, "You guys got to put this back on. You got to do it." And that's what got the motion picture made. The interest got so much interest was generated that they made those movies, and then 6 of them. They made 6 more movies, and then Next Generation came around, and Deep Space Nine, Voyager. I like the whole thing just came together. It was awesome because of exactly what you're talking about there. Those conventions, fan bases, people sending all this mail, fan mail.
Yeah. No, Trekkies they are a legitimate fan base. And like, there's a lot of new and look, they are very powerful. Like I'm sure Twilight fans are, got a lot of weight in the entertainment world. But
Right.
I just feel like people should put some respect on Star Trek's name. Also, by the way, side note, Lucille Ball is the mother of Star Trek and is responsible for Star
Totally.
Trek
I love Lucy. Yeah,
being
she was the one
actually,
that got into it and said,
yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, great question. I mean, I definitely will always answer Deep Space Nine or Star Trek
Right
episode
on.
questions.
Yeah, I got to check your Star Citizen thing out there, dude. That's awesome. I've been
Oh,
waiting for it. I check in on it every once in a while, but so you think it's at a point where it's, you know, pretty good, would you say?
oh yeah. Well, here's the thing about Star Citizen and where it is in development. And I've always felt
Mhm.
like this from a paramilitary perspective in the game. We are going to train in the way that the game is operating at that moment, right? When things change,
Right.
we'll train for that. But if
Okay.
you're a new player and you're coming into the game when it's all said and done, like let's say the game isn't done till 2025, 2026, right? And it's been 12 years of development. So that's 2 more
Mhm.
years. Let's say you come into the game at that time. Bro, I got a decade head start on you when it comes to tactics and strategy and economy and understanding of the mechanics that have changed. Like you are going to be preyed upon by people who are like us in organization, but are not like us in morals.
Right.
There are legitimate trolls and pirates and griefers out there who like
Yeah, that's what
nothing
happened to
more
Eve
than to
Online.
just destroy new players who come into that game because the learning curve is so high.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to destroy you, they're going to rob the shit out of you. Oh, you got
Right.
some rare minerals. You coming back from a haul? Oh yeah, give me that. Or we'll just destroy it, and you have no protection.
Yeah. It becomes a closed circle, eventually you get so many players. Like that's what happened with Eve Online. They got these people have been in there for 20 years, playing this game, and they're so good at it, and their factions are so powerful. You can get in on some of them, I guess, but I think a lot of people wait for a new game and then get good at it when it's new, and they got to kind of rinse and repeat, I suppose. But
Yeah, but we're also playing for a different reason. We're in space right now, and most of the stuff we do deals with being in space or being planetside. But we've never had the opportunity to build structures and build habitats and build bases and stuff like that. Well, that's coming this year. That's coming probably in the next patch. If
that's
not
going to
this
be
patch,
wild.
the patch after that. And so there's going to be so many star systems and so many planets and so many moons, so many places to build that ultimately you might not run into anybody in 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to check it out, and it sounds like it's a great time to get into it. Maybe we can get a little Temple Mount squad together and see if we can contribute somehow to the Unified Federation.
That would be fantastic.
It would be
I
pretty
think that would
cool.
be incredible.
Yeah, I think so
I've
too.
got a question.
Please, Kashika.
Yeah.
Hi. You were mentioning working on your last albums, like the last 4. You were saying. Do you have any plans for after that? What are they? If you are working on anything?
I just want to teach. I've started actually teaching hip hop in the last month, and I find that it's actually pretty fulfilling. I'll be 43 this year. I don't plan on going on crazy tours and anything like that. I do like to perform. I like to perform online, and I will always the performance of hip hop is one of those things that I feel like I can do as long as I can speak, and it's something that I enjoy doing, so I'll always do it. Putting out albums though is a chore. It is a task. It is everything that goes from writing rhymes to coming up with choruses that you haven't done before. And if you've got a catalog as large as mine, you've tried every different kind of way to flip your voice in a way that is unique. And So you have to kind of, you're not just writing songs when you're that late in your catalog. You're also competing against songs you've already written. So for me, I am trying to strategically plan around the fact that I don't want to compete with my previous catalog. I don't want to have to write stuff that goes directly up against my atheism stuff, my type 1, type 2, type 3 stuff, because that all that stuff, I'm not trying to recreate that. But there has to be an exit plan. And for me, the final album that's, outside of the Type 4 quadrilogy, because the first one's already done, is Deathbed Playlist. And Deathbed Playlist was an album that I always wanted to do as my last album, because I always wanted to do that album from the perspective of I have to listen to that album as I'm an invalid and I'm not able to really move and take care of myself. That's the album I want to listen to. And I need to make that when I have enough perspective in life to prepare me for the inevitable end of it. And so Deathbed Playlist is meant to be that album. Iron Star Era is meant to be the conclusion of the Cartridge of Scale series. So that's a finale of all finales. Last of the Rhyme Lords, the one that I'm working on right now, is very much about lyrics and about the exploitation of the theory of rhyme and how much I can show that I've mastered the concept of rhyming. But this is the last album I'll be able to do that on. Every album after this is the beginning of the end. The album that comes after this, Tour of the Orphan Night, is a very personal album where I bare my soul about where my life is right now at maybe 45, 46 years old. And it talks about some of the reasons why I kind of went the direction I went and, have some of the emotional flaws that I have and why I'm not married and have no children and I don't date. And you know what I mean? Like different things like that will be addressed in Tour of the Orphan Night. Tour of the Orphan Night will be done from the perspective of therapy. It will allow me to properly use music as a therapeutic output. In the beginning, I was doing that. I had to find out that art isn't therapy. And anybody who tells you it is, they're just using it to cope. And I had to figure that out the hard way by running up against these kind of issues with my emotions that I hadn't addressed from my childhood. I hadn't addressed from the traumas of growing up in group homes, the trauma of being in war, the trauma of being locked up, all the different things that came with those traumas I had never really addressed in therapy. Well, I went to therapy for years and it actually helped. And so then now it's like, okay, well, now if I write that album from the perspective of someone who actually went to therapy and got some help and all that type of stuff, what does that album sound like? So hopefully that album sounds like Tour of the Orphan Night. But then the final album of that series, Iron Star Era, is that great conclusion of all the Cartridge of Scale albums from Type 1 to Mandelbrot Set to Omniverse to Type 4. So hopefully that answers your question. I know I can be a little long-winded, but that's
no, that was perfect.
The end.
But
yeah.
it sounds beautiful, actually, the way that you're using your music and your albums for yourself. And yeah, very smart. Thank you.
Thank you. This is going to sound weird and maybe a little quote unquote spiritual, if I may, but often I don't feel like I'm life creating art. I feel like it's the art that's here to create the experience of life, if that makes sense. And I don't feel like a lot of times that I am directing that creativity. A lot of times I feel like I am, and it sounds weird, but like I feel like something is writing through me.
Okay.
Like I'm not in control of like when I go into that creative space, I feel like there is something that is taking form through the creativity. And
flowing through you?
And I'm just like tracing out the lines.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was really curious about because I know when I was listening to your music and like I play around with music a little bit and like whatnot, but there was something about your music that it seemed like you were connected to a source. It was like you were getting information from somewhere else, but you maybe didn't know or whatever. But it was just it hit me spiritually, like almost like the song was made for me, and well, not the whole song, but like a certain aspect of that song was made for me for that moment that I listened to it. And it was just something that I was curious. Did you feel like you were ever connected to source when rapping?
So I have a theory about the concept of source, and this goes into my when I was talking about making a case both for a reality with a creator and a reality without a creator. Now, for the record, I don't really subscribe to any human creation myths. I say really because I haven't heard one that's convinced me yet, but I will leave the possibility open that someone has the ability to convince me one day. I just haven't heard one yet that I say, okay, that sounds legit. But the nature of reality is such where I have to ask a few questions, and you may have to grant me a few miracles in order for this to work. But I think we can all agree in here in this podcast, in this chat, that something is. There is something. There is something rather than nothing. And I've always contended that the greatest question of all time is, why is there something rather than nothing? Now, you might have a better question than me for the greatest question of all time, but I haven't heard a better question than that. And the reason why that's important is because there may be the miracle you have to grant me that there just had to be something. Okay, not a satisfactory answer, but I'll accept it because it's the miracle you had to grant me. Okay, what is that something? Two roads you have. You have the something where it's an entity, a consciousness, if you will, or the second road, which is the theater, the potentiality for something to happen. Even if nothing does, it's there. But something exists rather than nothing. Why? That's a question best left for religions and philosophers and whatnot. But the why that I'm going to propose, I don't argue from a place of I think it's true. I'm making this case because it's simply a possibility. So imagine you are an eternal being. There's a couple of miracles you're going to have to grant me when you imagine this, but one of those is that you are eternal. Don't ask why, you just are. I don't know why, you just are. Sucks. Another aspect, another attribute is you are one of one. So there's nothing like you. There's no other being like you. And you're eternal. Here's the third attribute. You couldn't kill yourself if you wanted to. You can do almost anything except die. If you grant me those three miracles, I can make a case as to why God would create reality with death and suffering. Because there are things that are worse than death. It's called eternity. I know we're all afraid to die because life wants to live. I guarantee you nobody wants to live forever. People say it. I want to live forever in the kingdom of heaven with the Lord. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. But I think all consciousness wants a rest. Something just, you reach a limit of, okay, I'm tired. I want to go back to the place from which I came of oblivious nothingness. And so those three attributes, in my opinion, is why that being, if it had to exist because that's the miracle you grant me, the first thing I would do if I was that being, can't die, no companionship because I'm a one of one and I can't kill myself. What's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to divide myself up into an infinite amount of finite consciousnesses so that I can experience the things that I can't experience, which is companionship, because these finite things are now equal in standing, not one infinite thing creating something for companionship. And then you have this idea of I can die, or I can at least convince myself that I'm dying through pain. Yes, it does suck from the inside of the experience, but I guarantee you on the outside of the experience, you want nothing more than to be inside the experience. And that's the paradox of reality.
If I could just say, have you ever listened to Alan Watts, the philosopher? Because what you're saying is more or less what he was saying, is that you're the eternal self, and you're trying to find something to do, and he described it as like what you were saying about life and death. He described it the same way, that like much like you wake up and you do all the things you have to do that day, and you get tired and you want to go to bed, so you go sleep, and then you're just clocked out for a few hours. And he was saying that's what death is. Death is when God takes a nap for a who knows how long, until he eventually wakes up again and decides to do something, you know?
Yeah, I think there's some validity to looking at it that way. I think I heard it put in this particular perspective, which I always found interesting, which is someone had told me creation is the creator disassembled. And it always kind of made me think of like, if I was the creator and I divided myself up, if I'm infinite and I divided myself up into only finite quantized versions of myself, and only within that finite container, a finite amount of my infinite essence would be placed within that container. That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying this being chooses death to the alternative of eternal loneliness and isolation.
There's a concept that people in like the sort of psychedelic scene call the cosmic joke, and it's sort of this idea that you're correct, and that that God basically does the same thing every night, so to speak. So there's like an archetypical story that always plays out, and then when it ends, God becomes one again, takes a rest, and then plays out the whole thing, but in a new, different way. You know?
Yeah. And I guess we could always kind of, debate over what sleep is to an entity like that. Because I think that the issue that a lot of people have, well, that I have with a lot of people's description of God, is that they make it all powerful. And I would contend that if I believed in a God, it wouldn't be all powerful, because there are things that I would think it would want to do. Maybe my finite primitive brain, my corporeal, meat brain cannot comprehend something of this magnitude. But I don't think eternity is something that a consciousness would want to experience indefinitely, especially in just if you were a placeholder for reality itself, or you could create reality out of yourself and be inside of reality to actually have experiences. You may have the same experiences over and over and over again. You may have lived this, like, come on in. You may have lived this life, X amount of times, right? There's actually a woman named Dolores Cannon that I found out through my homie Sci-Fi. And if you guys want to go check out his music, check out Sci-Fi's music, SAIPHI. And he actually did a song. We did a song together called Source, where we were talking about kind of like the nature of source. But she speaks a lot about this concept of like choosing your lives. You chose the life that you lived because it was A, it was on the menu, right? And B, it offered some way to cope with the nature of the isolation that you experience. Maybe the worst parts of reality is this being's way of coping with its isolation. They say, when you isolate a human, that's one of the worst things you could do to him or her. So, there's an element of like, well, what happens when you're the only being You're super powerful. To the beings you create, you're all powerful. Right? To the beings you create, you are it. You are the apex. But to you, you're just like, I just want another being like me so I can love and be happy and maybe have offspring little gods, and they go to school with the other little gods and they, roast each other about their god parents, and I just want a normal god life, but I'm the only god, right? Maybe it's a situation like that where the desire for what corporeal finite beings experience is the one thing that the God wants it can't have.
Well, you can also view like suffering as like a polarity, right? Because when you have sure, it would be awful to only suffer, but when you have a really bad day and then the next day you have a really great day, that great day is made so much better by the comparison to the awful day you had yesterday. If you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
it's
but I do, but that only, and this is my own perspective of this, but that only makes sense if the God that you're talking about is all powerful, right? I think that is the distinction I'm trying to make, is that if the God that we're talking about creating all of reality in this instance, in this hypothetical that I'm bringing up here, um, if it can't do everything, right? That old saying, could God create a rock that he couldn't lift, right? Where it's like you're saying, is there something an all powerful being can't do? And I'm saying, if you're offering me this being as the creator of the universe, then you have to take one miracle away, maybe, right? Which is the miracle it can do anything, even the stuff beyond logic. Could it kill itself? Has it tried? If it really wanted to, could it? To me, I am more curious as to why a God would want to continue existing under those circumstances than not. To me, that's far more suffering than the alternative of nothingness. Again, this goes back to the question, why something rather than nothing?
So I'm conscious I don't want to take too much of your time, Graydon. I really
I got
appreciate you
time.
taking time out.
Hey,
Does
Clippers
anyone?
beat the Lakers yesterday. I got all the time you need.
Awesome. Well, that being the case, does anyone else want to take the chance to ask a question or make a comment?
I just wanted to say I really appreciate your philosophies. They're similar to my own, or at least these intellectual avenues you've explored. I've explored similar stuff, and so it's always nice seeing. It's always nice when you hear someone else talk about a thing you've seen, in their explorations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's nice to meet like-minded people and people who contemplate on the scale of Omni. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
100%.
I love
I'd like to
to.
point out how we normally get into conversations like that explore these types of ideas and thoughts, right? On a fairly regular basis. So anytime you want to pop in, we're usually in here.
Yeah.
I have a
And
question.
Graydon, go ahead, Hermes.
Yeah. What did you think about Star Trek Picard?
Oh man, my buddy Blue Picasso, one of the founders of GU, just started watching Star Trek Picard recently, and he's a big Trekkie, but he had heard so much negativity about not only Picard but Discovery, because I'm just gonna say it, like I love New Trek too. Like there are very few iterations of Star Trek I don't like. In fact, here's a hot take: fuck the Orville, straight up. That show is a negative parody of Star Trek. I think Seth MacFarlane never did that show in a way that truly made Star Trek look good, and it divided the fan base in a way he never really wanted to address, because he banks off of the people who hate New Trek watching his bullshit ass parody show. I've never been a fan of that show. I'm not even really a fan of him. We can get into all that, but another day, another subject. But I'm actually a huge fan of Star Trek Picard. Now, were the first season B minus, second season C plus. Now, I'm not want to ruin it for anybody. It's good Trek if you just want to follow on some good Trek story. I preface all of that to say this, and anybody who's listening to me, please hear my voice and hear it well. Star Trek Picard, season 3, is Apex Star Trek. It is the best single season of Star Trek to ever exist.
Well, we'll take that on board, and maybe we should do a full watch through of that season on the server. What do you think, Hermes?
Yeah, sure.
If you are going to do it, though, I would say make sure everybody is very familiar with all other iterations of Trek. I mean, especially Prime Timeline previous to the Dominion War.
Yeah,
I
you're
had a
right.
closing statement when I was asking my questions. I was just going to say a closing statement was, thank you for answering all my questions, Graydon, and I think you have a chill factor of 1,300%.
Oh, thanks, man. I smoked a big bowl before we got on here, so maybe it was the indica that I fucking norched to the face.
That's how we do it around here. So I just
Yeah.
want to thank you again, Graydon. Really interesting stuff. I think we all have a lot in common in terms of some of the values and ideas you've expressed and things that you're interested in. And I was serious about following up about, we'll let you know when we're watching Star Trek, and I'll follow up about the Star Citizen. But I just
Yeah.
want to thank you so much. I think it's awesome what you've done with Grand Unified, with the Federation.
Mhm.
Unified Federation, and with your music and the comics and everything else. So we'll be watching everything you're doing, and hopefully we can have you on the podcast again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And one last thing, if anybody wants to come to the GU Discord to hang out, discord.gg/Grand Unified. And everybody in here seems really cool. So you guys are more than welcome to come and enjoy. And all the people in GU, definitely check out the Temple Mount. I mean, this is the second interview, and both of them have been great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. If you want to send me a link to your server, I can post it in our partners channel, and I can post in the general chat for anyone who wants to check it out as well. But we can deal with that later. Perfect.
Yep,
Yeah. So there it is. So for anyone who's listening wants to check out Greydon's server, the Grand Unified, you can find it right there in general chat, and I'll throw it in the partner channel as well. So thanks again, Greydon. Really appreciate your time and your work. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And I guess we'll close this one here. So you can find us on the Temple Mount Discord server, and you can find this and our other podcasts on the Temple Mount and Roundtable podcasts on YouTube and BitChute. Thanks again, brother. Thanks, everybody. Good night. God bless.